Okay, welcome everybody. Call the meeting to order. Okay. I'm going to call the meeting of the Boca Raton Airport Authority on Wednesday, November 16th. I'll just remind everybody that we're being live streamed through YouTube and we're on camera and audio. So with that, let's do the roll call. You're seeing here. Speaking Boca Raton Airport Authority. Hear me twice. Personnel. Camera and audio. So that. Yeah. Good sale. Here. Present.
Here.
Here. Here. Great. We do have a quorum, and do we have anybody on the phone?
Mr. Lyon is joining us on the agenda item related to the
Our law firm. Okay. With that, Claire Bennett, you want to make an introduction?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We wanted to introduce Erin Spiropoulos. She is our new intern, started with us maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. She is assisting us in the accounting and administration functions, and she is pursuing her master's degree in economics at Florida Atlantic University, and she graduated with an undergraduate degree in international business from FAU as well. So we're really thank you.
Okay, first item of business is we've got several sets of minutes that were in our board package. So let's start with the first one was the workshop of October 19th, 2022. So I'm looking for a motion on that. So move minutes. Second. Okay, motion a second. Any questions, comments, changes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Next is the approval of our regular meeting, which is October 19th.
Yeah, so moved.
Second, Bob. Questions? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. And then last is the BRAA board workshop of November 8th. The set of minutes was packaged.
Good move.
Second from now, okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed. Agenda changes. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sorry.
Public request. If any member of the public wishes to provide a comment on any item, the time to do so is now. Please complete a public comment card identifying the item upon which you wish to be heard and provide it to Ms. Landers. The public comment cards are located in the back of the room to my right. Each member of the public wishing to comment will be provided with 5 minutes. So the chair reserves the right to move the public comment opportunity on a specific agenda item to the point in the agenda when that item is to be considered and or to extend the allotted time per speaker. Do we have any public? Consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda?
That's
Federal, state, and municipal input. Is there any input?
No, sir.
Groups? All right, next order of business number 7 is financial report for October. And Randy, as our secretary treasurer, you have any comments on that?
No, this is our 1 month into the new year, so there are some timing differences on the expenses, and namely in the marketing and special events area. Just to note, they're all approved items. We just have to pay them out the first.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask
of the
about.
year.
330 some odd percent.
Yeah. So, but with that, I'll turn it over to Robert.
Okay, Robert.
Yes, thank you. Robert Hacker, Finance Administration Manager. Rob, good for it.
Yeah, we get the slide.
There you go. As we can see, total operating revenues here today are approximately 550,000, which is 1.5% above budget year to date. Total operating expenses Year to date are approximately 375,000, which is approximately 4.6%, 4.6% budget year to date. And this is primarily due to the timing of the expenses we were talking about. Mainly marketing and special events category, which is like the CAP donation and scholarship market. Too. As you see, the net income before depreciation is approximately 176,000. Half of it for management and the secretary and treasurer. We respectfully that the two finance support.
Great, thank you, Robert. I'll look for a motion on the October financial report for people.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Okay, any questions? I mentioned a second, any questions, comments? You already heard a little bit from Randy, some of the discrepancies. Okay, it's just the first month of the fiscal year, so.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you very much. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Are there any tenant reports or requests?
There are none.
Next item is the item 9, noise abatement operations summary for the month of October. And Hannah Oakland is going to present that. Hannah?
Before you in operation report.
Can you hold the microphone closer?
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Hannah.
October 2022. During the month of October, there were 7,900 operations, which is a 3% increase from October last year. Jelly deliveries were down 22% compared to October of 2021. Gas deliveries were up 100% compared to last October. There were 5 different households that filed noise concerns during the month of October, most of which came from the online web portal. And during the month of October, Customs had 93 aircraft clearance, which is slightly down from 108 total aircraft clearance in the month of October 2021. There was 1 vessel clearing as well for these 93 aircraft arrived from a total of 18 different countries. And there were a total of 26 after-hours clearings during the month. 13 occurred on days in the facility is normally closed. The operations report for the month of October. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Hannah?
No, I just want to make a few observations.
Yeah.
Positive observations. With the operations we had in October, which is Scott Knight's shoulder season, that's averaging damn near 96,000 operations a year, closing in on 100,000 operations a year, which is phenomenal. Secondly, on the noise, though we get these people hitting the button every month, we really only had 5 calls, like the good old days, remember? And I think it's fabulous. It's fabulous.
Yeah, that's good news.
Yeah. No, it used to be 3 to 5 calls on the computers.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just have a very general question. Echo Mel's comment that we're closing in on 100,000. Is there a max number where you go, oh my gosh, we are so overloaded? Given how the size of the runways and, you know, our capacity, is it 100,000? Is there a magic
It's
number?
an annual service volume, and when we,
That's exactly what you go.
Okay.
thank you, Mel. And when we come back to you, do we have a schedule yet for the workshop for the master
It's gonna
plan?
be in the March timeframe.
Well-
That's part of the capacity
Right.
analysis that the consultants did. It was presented to the tenants of the technical advisory committee a few weeks ago. And as Claire alluded, it'll be presented to the board at the next board workshop. And if I recall correctly, the number was somewhere in the 160,000 range.
Busy control.
Develop this annual service volume. That's sort of when delays start to really stack up
Right,
and
right.
impact the airspace surrounding the airport. And so the purpose of the master plan then is to try to make improvements on the airfield that would minimize those delays. So sort of, you know, taxiway improvements, other enhancements, hold bay areas, et cetera. So you'll see some of those
We don't have
alternative.
backups or anything like that.
Right, in an ideal world, we would be looking at, high-speed exits off the runway or maybe even a parallel runway. We don't live in that environment. Right, so the tweaks so what you'll see as our development alternatives are really refinement of sort of the airfield and adding maybe some cold areas, and things like that around, so that there's some bypass, but
Field's only a small part. How quickly air traffic control can give all these jets, which are all on higher, 99%, I'll guarantee on IFRS with flight rules plans. They have to get their clearances from FAA. And then they have to be able to pass them on, and also the inbound clearances. That's where you'll really stack up. And that's why sometimes you go to an airport like Fort Lauderdale and I said, a taxi hold. Well, the JFK is backed up and they can't issue clearances, et cetera. So I think it's phenomenal, the amount of traffic we have.
There,
Oh, yeah, we have room for growth. Oh, yeah.
Sirs, Randy?
Yeah, just, consistent a little bit with what Mel was saying, operations are up 3% year over year. Any color though around fuel down 23% over the same period.
what we're seeing in terms, if you look at, sorry, Hannah, I'll jump in on the page that talks about the operations, training aircraft activity is 30%, IFR is 32, and VFR is 38. So what we're seeing is there's a slight decrease, as Mel alluded to, there's a shoulder season. So the slight decrease in business jet activity, things are leveling off. There was the election cycle, there were hurricanes as well that impacted total aircraft activity for business jets. But we're seeing more sport and recreational and flight training as Lynn University picks up and the other flight schools pick up.
Plus, as we discussed a few years ago, the monthly report that we see on fuel is the deliveries. So that you might go a whole month without an avgas delivery and it'll show zero. But yet, trust me, it's being burned. So remember, we talked about that a couple of years ago. The figures are a bit skewed because not so much the gas being used, it's the gas being delivered.
So the fuel, that report where you see for avgas or for Jet A decreasing, that's a direct correlation to a leveling off or decreasing of business jet compared with last year. Of course, 21 was unprecedented in terms of activity compared to even 2019. So what we're noticing, and this is typical in the industry and all across the board, is a leveling off of business jet activity for now. And as we embark in the season, we might see that pick up again, but we're not going to see those year-over-year growths that we saw in 2021. Not very likely to happen, especially if the economy starts to slow down.
There's also been a trend in the last couple of months where it's more regional traffic, where they're not going, out to California or the West Coast. It's more up to North Carolina, Northeast, that sort of thing. So it's a shorter flight, less fuel use.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Hannah? For some team? Hannah, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Next is airport noise and operations, the monitoring system contract. And Robert Abbott's going to present that. Okay, Robert.
Back in July, the airport issued a request for proposals for the airport noise and operations monitoring system. The system is what we currently have. It produces, provides for us the flight tracking that we do, the public portal that we have, as well as our noise monitors. So following the review of the proposals and the interviews, three respondents that we had, Virus Suite was ranked as the #1 firm. So that's the contract that's before you in your package, and it's for an initial 3-year term that begins on January 1st, 2023. We'll go through the end of December. We'll have an option for 2 1-year renewals as well, and the amount for the first year is $73,000, and it has 3% escalation each year. So with that, airport management does recommend the approval of resolution number 112422, awarding the contract to airport operation monitoring system, even Virus. Representatives in Virus Suite obviously are not here. They did stop by the other day, and I sat down with them and we discussed some of the. So I can bring any questions you have.
Okay, let's see if we have a motion first.
Make a motion to approve.
Second. Okay, now questions and comments. Cheryl, I think you were up first.
is the 3% escalation annually, starting in year one, a normal thing that you see in contracts?
But we have it in some of our contracts, yes, and that was part of their cost proposal on which they were evaluated. It was one of the criteria. So that they happen to actually be, I think, the lowest, even with the 3% for the full contract period. And I'd like to, if I may, Mr. Chair, thank Mr. Folden. Mr. Folden providing oversight throughout the process, and I believe you concur with staff recommendation.
A few years ago, when Harris wanted to incorporate the contract, correct me if I'm wrong, they supply all new equipment, am I correct?
That's correct.
Are they leaving it or are we getting new equipment?
It'll be taken is their equipment who's leasing it through the contract. Obviously, we'll be providing.
It's the next generation, presumably. Oh, cool. All right.
Beauty of the lease.
Sorry?
That's the beauty of the lease. Is that you get.
You think I lease all my cars? Same reason.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and second, so all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so resolution 11/24/22 passes. Thank you very much. All right, next up is amendment to the public transportation grant agreement on the administration building improvements. And Robert Abbott, you're going to handle that one as well?
Yes.
Robert?
So back in December of 2021, the airport authority did accept the public transportation grant agreement with the Florida Department of Transportation for the administration building improvements. This was in the amount of $150,000, with the FDOT portion being 80% of $120,000. DOT is now offering the amendment to that today for an additional $96,000, which brings the total cost to $270,000, and their DOT share of 80% now $216,000. The airport shares that. So with that, airport management does recommend the approval of resolution 112522, authorizing an amendment to the public transportation grant agreement, state of Florida Department of Transportation for the administration building.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, second.
Sounds like a good deal to me.
Okay, yeah. They stepped up, so questions, yes, no.
I have two questions. The first question, tongue in cheek, is where will the hot tub, sauna and pool be? And the second question is, what are we doing to the building? What are you guys thinking of doing?
So there's a number of improvements that we're looking to do, mostly to this room. As you know, this room was never intended to host the board meetings and the streaming capabilities. So we've kind of had to put a hodgepodge of it together. Rob's back there in the corner with a bunch of messy wires and everything. So the idea is to get this room wired up in a more professional broadcast standpoint. There'll be a permanent AV station back here behind us where there'll be connections to the network. The AV equipment will actually be on the network now. We'll have a brand new large screen TV down at the opposite end behind where the chair is sitting currently. And that's going to allow us to open up this back wall here with some temporary partitions that we can open up if there's a large event or we expect a lot of public participation in a meeting, and we'll be able to expand the seating a little bit more so it's not so awkward with everyone crammed in. We're also rearranging some of the office spaces. We've added some new employees since we've built this building and sort of had some time to live with it. So we're going to be adding 3 new offices down at the primary office wing, which will allow us to move everyone from the other end of the building as well. And those current office spaces will be turned into storage for
Director's
filing and other
lounge.
things. Director's lounge?
Yeah.
We're not getting any, but we'll be getting a shower for the applicant to utilize out in the.
Are we changing the footprint at all with these new offices?
Not the footprint. We're gonna try to remain within the load bearing walls to the greatest extent possible. So
Sounds good.
you'll see a different floor plan, but not necessarily a different footprint.
That's nice.
When you say the camera equipment will put us on the network, are you talking about like when we were down at City Hall? Like that network of the city?
No,
The
what-
channel or whatever that was that we were.
that's a separate service through Granicus, which is fairly expensive, and that's something we could look into getting back into down the road. The network rack right now, you'll see kind of there's a computer back where Rob is with the switcher board and all that to run everything. the new switcher board will be back in the server room and it'll be plugged into the network. So you'll theoretically be able to do all the editing and switching of cameras from anywhere within the office, as long as you have connection to the office-wide network.
It's our internal computer network.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it allows you to be more mobile with whoever is running the meeting instead of just being, stuck in one corner back in.
Because I see, of course, the city council meeting is publicized and broadcast, as well as I think the P and Z meetings. But so there's no rule that we have.
No,
To do that.
the only thing we have to do is keep minutes. You may recall, when we were down at City Hall, we paid City Hall to do all that. Part of the initial, when we moved in here, we got an initial set of AV equipment so we could continue broadcasting, and we broadcast via YouTube and Zoom. So
Do that.
we're doing that currently, correct? So if you have some guys.
Feedback in the community.
So people are watching.
If we had fiber optic into the city's network, could we then be broadcasting on channel 20? And
I would assume that would only need a internet connection. I don't think we would need a direct
Don't need
fiber
it.
connection.
Don't
I
need
wouldn't think so. I'm not 100% sure. That's something we can ask John downtown to see what would be required, but
Okay.
theirs goes out through, I believe, the Granicus public broadcast system, and then that gets on the channel, whatever it is, the 26, I believe you said.
Yeah, okay, I just wonder, I know when they put 3200 on, they did put it on the fiber so that they could have direct control of it. Yes, but anyway, that's something that people would ask about when they don't see us any. Which might be good or bad.
YouTube stars.
The internet.
TikTok.
We could look into it. Don't currently have that as a social platform, but I think there might be some restrictions at the state agency.
Okay.
It's good.
Good discussion. Yeah, thanks. Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion, and a second. All in favor of resolution 1125, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is fiscal year 2023 operating budget amendment. Claire, you gonna take this, or
Yes, sir.
Randy? With-
I don't know, Randy, if you want to make any introductory.
No.
Right now, as you know, this is our entire team here. There's 7 full-time employees and 2 part-time positions. And so our request is based on our existing workload, what we're looking at, in terms of attracting employees, and what we're looking at in the future in the next, year or two, as far as upcoming projects and programs. We would like to create a new full-time position. This was precipitated quite candidly with Vanessa leaving. She was a part-time position, which basically the part-time positions, as you see, we reserve those for interns. So we have 2 interns currently. And so with Vanessa leaving on to, wonderful things in her chosen career field, it gave us pause to sort of take a look at our organizational structure. We have Hannah as a new employee, and we would like to add another full-time position, somebody who could start into the organization, really learn the ropes, and then we could, kind of create buckets of areas of responsibility based on what they bring and what we have currently going on. And that model has worked for us, as you can see, over the last few years, with several employees starting kind of in that more operational mode, and then evolving their positions as projects come up and as their areas of focus and interest, sort of align.
So this isn't changing a part-time to a full-time, it's just adding a 1 full-time.
Correct.
The 2 intern, part-time. interns.
Yes, we'd like to keep the interns, we don't always have 2 interns, we sometimes don't have 1,
Yeah.
but it does allow us the opportunity to, we are partnering with Embry-Riddle, with Lynn University, FAU, to George Snow. And so we'd like to keep the 2 interns as part-time, but we'd like to add a new full-time position.
Do you have a proposed title?
For now, it's operations coordinator.
We can ask a couple more questions, then I'll look for a motion if we want, but let's go ahead and ask questions.
Can you describe the ideal skill set?
Yes, I think, someone who, has somewhat of an aviation background. For example, Hannah, that was our newest employee. She has extensive experience in the fixed base operator world at BRAA world. She worked at Signature, similarly to Rob. Rob Abbott, who's been here a number of years now, originally had a background in FBO as well as airport management, airport operations at Fort Lauderdale executive and airport maintenance. So someone with some airport experience. Right now, the position requires a 4-year degree or a degree plus experience if they have, for example, a 2-year degree or a certification like a American Association of Airport Executives certified member designation and experience. So it allows for some combination of education and experience and certifications. So that's what we would be looking for, someone who really wants to be at an airport, at a dynamic airport, and can really take on some of the day-to-day operational responsibilities, but also some of these programmatic initiatives that we have on our agenda.
Okay, real quick, yeah.
Okay, just real quick. So, based on what you were saying initially, would this position, as you often do with other employees, then rotate around to broaden the scope and value of the employee?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that one of the issues that we always have, if one leaves, it's like, okay, it's a fist out of water. Yes, it closes, but you still have, if you just have one person with one area of expertise, they go, gee, I don't know how to do what Randy did. So that is clearly part of the.
Absolutely. That, like I
strategy.
mentioned, that strategy has worked out really
Yes,
well
no, it
for
has.
us with everyone. Christine's job is vastly different than when she started. Rob started as an operations coordinator, then he took on the noise program, and he took on some IT functions, and then grants administration, finance. So that is exactly the goal, is to have something like that develop.
Is so the benefits package is probably worth what, about 10,000 or so? So the starting salary would be in like the 60 range or something like those lines? How does that work?
I think, Rob, do you remember the breakdown? This is for 9 months, so this would be the 3/4 is for.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
I think it's in the mid-50s,
So I was saying that sounds kind of.
And we're saying approximate, because again, we don't know when the position will start, salary requirements, but it is comparable to our, new operations coordinator position.
Okay, so we had some discussion already, but I have a motion.
So moved.
Second. We have a second. So any other questions or comments? I guess Randy, I look to you as a treasurer. I mean, finance has been strong, the balance sheet's strong. I don't see any major impacts to our
No,
budget.
no, I mean,
Overall.
the only thing that, we wish is that we're 1 month into the new fiscal year, and, so it's just something that just came up, and I think it's the right thing to be doing, and, obviously we got the revenue capacity to, handle it, so.
Well, I could see with Vanessa leaving. Rethink things. Okay, so we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion on the question? All in favor? Say
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 11/26/22 passes. The budget amendment. Next up is the Information Technology Services Contract Amendment. And Scott, you're going to handle this for us?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The board may recall back in February of 2020, we entered into a new contract for IT vendor services. This is the vendor that provides all of our help desk type issues, blacked out of your computer. They do all the security, network security, backups, any new computer setups, any different equipment that we have come in and on board. They set all that up. And one of the things that they have is the backup disaster recovery system, which is basically if something happens, there's a giant flood, all of our physical network infrastructure goes down. They can basically just come in, find a new machine, and put everything that was there yesterday onto the new machine. So it's a very important service that they have. Now, unfortunately, those services do change from time to time. There's different subscriptions that were offered then that aren't offered now, and that's the case we're running into today, where the existing BDR service is no longer available and no longer meets the requirement of all the cybersecurity insurances and all of that. And the new service to replace that is a little bit more expensive. Now with the current contract layout, we have the ability to add more seats or more equipment, but not necessarily increase the cost of an existing service. So the resulting impact, there is a typo in the memo. It's not the $1,551 more per month that you see there. I verified with Eric for Simplify prior to the meeting. It's only a $425 increase for the new and upgraded BDR services monthly, correct? The overall annual price of the contract is currently $29,000 and some change. So it will be a slight increase there, maybe comes out to what, about $30,000, $3,000 to $6,000 more a year. So airport management recommends approval of resolution 1127-22 authorizing amendment to the contract for information technology services with Simplify LLC to replace and upgrade the.
We have a motion. Okay, Mitch, you have a motion.
Second.
Second, Mel. Questions, any comment or Mel? Or-
No,
All right, Mitch, you made a motion. Yeah, go ahead.
So. Is there a plan B?
Is there a plan
An
B?
alternative to this? In other words, if we don't do this, then what?
Eric, I'll throw that one over to you.
Still the back.
Okay.
This is a better technology. Better system.
More capacity, better, easier, checks a lot of boxes, better.
We had a case that the front end was showing that it was positive on the back end.
Okay.
So, as soon as that happens, we don't trust that better anymore. Go with it.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, if you would, introduce yourself, Eric.
Stand in the corner.
For the record, and just because we are being broadcast, I can't hear
Hey, Greg.
You would start.
Souls would simplify. So the question are you?
you. Yes,
So the question was, okay, so if we choose not to do this, then what would the alternative is for the airport? For the backup that we obviously need to have.
So the backups, you currently have the same backups in place that was signed in 2020. The problem we had is one of our clients, we had an existing issue when we were doing a restore. That the front end of the software was showing positives, so it was being backed up, but the back end was showing negatives. So we're thinking the whole time it's being backed up, we get the alerts, we get the monitoring, but we do a test, it's not. And unfortunately, when that happens, we gotta change vendors automatically, because I can't take that risk. So that's the reason, the main reason why. And so we've done tests, we've done everything possible, and backups are still in place. But we had to make the new backups are already in place, and as I mentioned, this is a must. I can't take the risk.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we have the same system that this other client has. It didn't work for them. So it may not work for us. So why take that risk when you don't have to take the risk, $5,000 more a year to do it? The other thing I would say is I'm kind of going through this in my practice like crazy. My IT is just going through the roof, about 10-20% a year. For all this kind of stuff, new technologies, stuff going in, things, yeah, it's just.
so this is really just about technology change. Is that what
Part of
you're
it is
saying?
technology change and
Security.
security, right?
Sure.
A lot of security. I mean, a lot of my clients didn't care 2 years ago. Now they do. I gotta add more stuff. It costs more.
What's the annual amount of the contract, the total contract right now?
Currently, it's a little over $29,000 a year.
So this is a fairly significant increase of $18,000.
No, so
No,
it's 6. It's 5. It's 5,000. It's 42.50 a month.
Correct, yes, as I mentioned that at
That's a-
1550, it's actually $425, so about $6,000.
I mean, not an area to take a risk on, so. And, right.
The airport authority not know before now that the system that we have may not work. Don't we do annual or semi-annual testing on these things?
Baby tests. So again, it's a risk.
Work
It works.
then we put it in. Often you test it throughout the year, but for another client, it didn't work and you just say, funky, that's just.
There's a concern with the reliability.
Yeah, okay. Want to be sure we're testing it, I mean.
Agreed.
Yes, Mel.
you guys are local, I assume?
Yes, sir, we're in Newport.
Okay, and so the response time is pretty quick.
That's the best possible way, yes.
Oh, okay.
I would say yes, that's more of a question to.
Yes, it is. Satisfied, right, with the service, Scott? Yes, that was a question for you. Okay. All right, any other questions for Eric or Scott or? All right, we have a motion and a second to pass this motion on the 11/27/22. So on favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. Okay, next item is 9F, Boca Raton Airport Authority bylaws, lobbyist registration and disclosure. So Clara, we'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the board will recall, there were some contacts by a lobbyist representing Premier Aviation that occurred prior to last month's meeting. There is a lobbyist registration and lobbying procedures process that is articulated in your bylaws. And I kind of alluded last month that they appear to not have been followed. So the bylaws dictate that when there is a concern that a lobbyist has not followed the procedures as articulated in the bylaws, that the executive director shall conduct an investigation and, depending on the findings, refer the incident to a hearing officer. So I just want to make sure that that is stated for the record, that this is something that has occurred, and based on my review of the timing and timeline of the contacts that were made to you, as well as when the registration occurred and then the failure to disclose those contacts directly to me as prescribed in the bylaws, I will be embarking on that process of selecting a hearing officer so that the hearing officer can hear from the other party and make a determination. So my understanding is that there is no option, right, Ms. Petrick? This is something that is stated as a shall in the bylaws, and that there's really no other, way around it. But I just, because of, this is our first time undergoing something like this, since those bylaws were updated several years ago. I just wanted to let everyone know that that process is something that we're going to have to follow.
Okay, thank you for the update. Questions, Cheryl?
Where is your pool of hearing officers? To whom do you look? What is the characteristics, the skill set? Is it a lawyer? What?
Yes, there are people who have experience as either hearing officers or special masters. In fact, Ms. Petrick has given me a couple of contacts to reach out to see if they would be willing to take on kind of that.
And they are outside, they're not within your law firm.
That's right.
They're
These are people,
outside your law.
yes, the people who I have suggested are board certified local government lawyers who routinely serve as special magistrates for other local governments, for code enforcement and for other special magistrate hearings. So I know that they have the requisite experience required.
They completely object.
I think I saw.
Yes, they have no prior relationship with any,
You just think that
any of the
necessary
folks.
to be on the record. Nobody we know, nobody's brother-in-law, nobody attached to your organization. We have other.
They do this work typically. They do this work typically.
Trying to understand what we're doing here. I see a one sentence thing here. I'm not criticizing. We're gonna have a discussion, but is it gonna be down the road? What are we doing?
Well, as I mentioned, we have their bylaws that dictate the process that a lobbyist hired by a tenant or another party that is coming before you has to follow if they're going to lobby you regarding the item that will be brought forward to you for a vote. So at the last month meeting, there was an item related to one of our tenants. You were lobbied.
Yes.
Some people spoke with them, some people didn't, but you were lobbied. And there are procedures that lobbyist is required to follow that are prescribed, pretty detailed, and simple, straightforward steps in the bylaws that were not followed. So because they were not followed, it triggers an action on my part that I have to follow the other parts of the bylaws.
40.
That's right. And I have to conduct an investigation as to whether in fact there was a perceived violation. And then if I find that it looks like there was, then I have to go to this hearing officer that has a background in this kind of work, and along with other.
What are the potential outcomes of the hearing? Consequences. Authority.
They could find that it's not, you know, a breach or material, but there are also some financial penalties that could be, you know, assessed. The failure to properly register is $200 per day, now to exceed $2,500. Failure to properly provide lobbying contact information, up to $250 for each violation. Lobbying while suspended pursuant to the other two sections, so if there are further occurrences, up to $2,500, those kinds of things.
And I'll ask a question here before. Is that a recommendation, the hearing officer going to come back to us and we have to take action, or this hearing officer has the authority to take action based on what is found?
I think I have to follow the process. You know, that's prescribed here, so there is no action on.
So
This is for information and for the record, again, given, you know, this is our first time. I want to make sure that we're transparent and on the record.
First of all, what qualifies as a lobbyist? How many of them currently have
Registered.
registered?
We have 2, maybe 3 with Lauren Odom. A lobbying is somebody seeking to influence a decision through oral or written communication, or an attempt to obtain the goodwill of any board member, the executive director, or any employee with respect to the passage, defeat, or modification of any item which may foreseeably be presented for consideration to the board. That's lobbying. Lobbyist means any person who is employed and receives payment, or who contracts for economic consideration for the purpose of lobbying on behalf of a principal. It shall include an employee whose primary responsibility to the employer is overseeing the employer's various relationships with government, which may or may not include the authority, or representing the employer in its contact with government, which may not include the authority. So a tenant contacts you directly on an issue, that is not lobbying. An attorney or a lobbyist hired by the tenant to contact you, influence your decision, your vote at a meeting, that is a lobbyist. That is lobbying. Is that correct?
Does the individual who reaches out and makes the contact have to be a registered lobbyist?
Yes, there's a procedure where there's a form that is attached to the bylaws that they fill out, they present to us. There's a $25 registration fee. And then there are steps that they take with regard to disclosure, and then they contact you. And I have responsibility to maintain a disclosure contact log as well.
Certainly remember all this.
Yes.
And just to confirm, the individual that we're talking about here, in particular reaching out, is indeed registered. They followed that.
They did after they had reached out to board members. They did register, but that was one step in the process that superseded the registration. That's part of the issue.
Part of the issue.
Right.
Okay. And some of us on the board have been here for a while, may recall that these were issues in prior years. And I thought we're very diligent in putting together this new procedure that we all felt comfortable with. And I want to, if I may, address you, Amy, in looking at the procedures that we have, because I don't think we put them in place while you were our outside counsel. They are valid, they are fair, they are within best practices. There's nothing onerous there, at least at your first reading.
So the procedures that you have, I think, provide for notice and opportunity to be heard by the person who you are attempting to enforce your rules against. And those are the hallmarks of due process. That's the procedural due process that you owe someone. So I think that those items are addressed in here. There's also some discussion about, some limited discovery. Without doing extensive research, the features that I would be looking for in a valid process, I see in these rules.
And my real question there, underlying, this is not a legal opinion, I'm asking you, does anything there seem overly onerous to you?
No, I mean,
So on
It's a
validity, I understand you're saying,
Certainly.
yes, it looks like it has all the earmarks, that's reasonable and customary. But is there anything there that looks like we have set the bar so high or so difficult or made it particularly onerous for an individual lobbying?
No, I mean, your lobbying registration process is fairly succinct. Yeah. Yeah, you have to register before you have the contact, and if you have the contact, then you let the, you make the log of that contact known so that there's transparency. Those are things that
I think that's important to
you
keep in
typically
mind
see.
as we make your decision. And just to clarify, we will not have to make any decisions here. It's all a matter of fact that is determined by an outside independent entity.
This is just information. We don't need to take any action on it.
This again is just sort of it, and just getting it on the record that this is something that has occurred that now invokes the process.
Form, no action required. Thank you. Oh, yeah, gee, sorry.
I just want to follow up. Who are our current lobbyists and do they have to renew?
I don't know about the renewal. We have Howard Dubosar has registered earlier, I think last year when he first began representing Premier. I believe Lauren Odom, who was representing Premier on behalf of Bonnie Miskell's firm, doing the permitting process, and David Millich also with that firm on the permitting process, who presented here last.
With respect to renewal, it simply says that it is the obligation of the lobbyist to keep their registration form up to date. They have a minimal $25 fee when they first register, but it is not an annual re-registration process.
So the re-registration is annual.
It is not. You just have to keep it up to date. So
What
that if
does that mean? Oh, no. good change.
that's all you got to do. Just keep it up to
Okay.
date.
Good.
So if one of these people that he then represents a different client, does she still, is lobbying carry over to
It's
that?
a separate registration for each principal representative. And if the person terminates their relationship with that principal, they have to advise you in writing.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, next item is number 10, Authority Board Member Requests and Reports, and the first one is Boca Raton Airport Authority Charter Local Bill. Just so that you know, we have material in our board package, but also there's new material sent out separately in email, and now you have it in front of you in a hard copy. I'm going to turn it over to Amy Petrick. This was the subject of our workshop for those of the others in attendance here. So Amy, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you. So the two items that I have provided since the last workshop is a red line version of the bill. And so everything that is indicated in red underline is an edit. And then also a memorandum of key changes. So the red line represents things that are new from the workshop and is intended largely to effectuate your comments from the workshop. There are a couple of items that are new based on further research and communication with staff. And so just to go through the substantive pieces, the changes on the first page are largely not substantive. They are simply intended to reflect that this is an amendment and it's not the recodification that was done in the mid-2000s. So the next one in the definition of number 1 was capitalizing the word facilities, and that was a board member suggestion. It was a good one, so we did that. In the definition of facilities, I added towers and observation areas, and that was based on conversation. We also added all areas, buildings, appurtenances, equipment, tangible and intangible property, machinery necessary to support federal agencies providing services, and that again, reference to your Custom Border Patrol facility. And then the reference to intangible property, it is intended to reflect the comments regarding data and licenses and other IP products that you do purchase in order to facilitate your operations. And please, at any time, if you want to have a conversation about a specific edit, some will be more substantive than others, please let me know at that point and I can stop and we can have the conversation. For the definition of project, which is the subsection 10, I had to rework the language a little bit in order to effectuate board member comment that the project should reflect the valid purpose as determined by the authority. I reorganized the language a little bit there to effectuate that comment. So for section 3, I included a reference to the purpose of the district. That is actually just a statutory requirement under Chapter 189 for special district charters. So that's what that's for. In section 4, number 6, this is, you will recall we had a conversation about quorum and physical appearance and videographic appearance. So I changed the word less to fewer, which was a good catch by a board member. And then we removed the language that I had proposed for discussion about videographic appearance. In the next section, we removed the word misfeasance, and we included the reference to the board adopting a procedure to determine excused absences. That was, I think, the upshot of the conversation during the workshop on that matter. So then moving on to section 5, which is the powers and duties section. Number 2, we removed the reference to eminent domain. The changes to 5, 6, and 7 were intended to accomplish a couple of things. One of which was to clarify those positions that speak directly to the board versus those that are under the supervision of the executive director. And that's why airport council was created in a separate line item, because I belong to you. From an operational perspective, I don't operate through your executive director, although we obviously, work together. And then for number 6, I just clarified that they work under the supervision of the executive director. Number 7 reflects the security, fire suppression, and enforcement services, and that was a staff comment that there may be times when the FAA requires you to have specialized employees fitting within those categories. Other special districts do have that referenced in their special acts, and so now your proposed one has it as well. Number 8 is a new item and is intended to reflect an obligation under Chapter 189 regarding the development of your investment plan, the ability to invest and reinvest surplus funds.
Is this section 5 number, paren 8?
Yeah.
Not on our-
Yes, that's right. It's section 5, paren 8. Apologize about that change. You may recall that when we were talking about various finance provisions, and you'll see that section later, there was a question of, have we delineated very clearly that you have the ability to make investments and reinvest money? And so this subsection 8 is intended to address that issue. Consistent with the language that you find in Chapter 189 about what special districts have to do financially. The next change is just to clarify that you have the ability to adopt your bylaws. And 15 is clarifying that you have the ability to have annual financial reports and financial audit reports. Those are, again, obligations out of 189. So in 16, this was a comment by staff the idea here is that there's language about your ability to adopt rules for the operation of the airport, including safety and noise abatement. There's some preemption language at the federal level regarding safety and noise abatement. And so we were simply trying to harmonize your ability to engage in rulemaking with the federal preemption. And so we just put to the extent permitted by law, just to reflect that obviously everything you do has to be consistent with general law, both at the state and federal level. The next edition, there's a reference to bonds being approved by resolution that again is just a feature of chapter 189 for special districts. Some special district acts, when I was researching this issue, are very elaborate with respect to how they articulate how bonds are adopted, what strictures there are on bonds. We had not had discussion about limitations that you wanted to place on your bonding capacity. And so this was a minimal change just to address the procedure for bonds, simply that you adopt them by resolution. But I did want to flag for you that there is a broad variety of ways in which special district charters handle the notion of letting bonds. So if you are interested in further discussion on that, we can certainly have it. So then the next section, 23, maintaining the website and posting notices, that's an obligation under 189. And so we're just empowering you to meet that obligation. Section 24, engaging in public-private partnerships, joint partnerships. These are opportunities to create economic relationships with other public and private partners that we wanted to make clear that you have the capacity to do because you are entrepreneurial in nature. And so these are vehicles for you to engage in creative business activities consistent with the laws that are referenced there. And that came from a staff suggestion. So in section 6, we changed the word salary to compensation. That was a direction from the workshop. We removed the reference to staff here simply because currently you have adopted in your employment procedure manual travel compensation for staff that is based on the federal GSA. The thinking was that it was easier to implement when you compensate staff. So that's why it is your compensation that would follow 112, but not staff's. So that's what that change is. In highlighting in the comment box, there is a reference here to whether or not you want to maintain existing language that requires your fiscal year to track the same fiscal year as the city. And so that's just what would be the
It's carryover language. I noted that too, and I saw that when we were under control of the city. I think now it's board members by the county and by the city. So, I mean, to me, it doesn't matter. It seems like it's old language. We don't have to be tied to the city's budget. We don't get any money from the city, right?
It's a carryover from the original bill from back in 1983 that was not changed in 2004. So we highlighted it because, again, it sort of feels like a remnant from a dependent special district relationship versus an independent. So we just highlighted it for your.
I'd be in favor.
Oh, no problem.
Reminds me, there was another section in here, I can't find
Yes.
it now, about meetings within the city limits. 4-6.
This year, airport authority show.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's real
I
good.
mean, I guess there could be a reason to change it.
It'd be easy.
We got it covered.
You're an independent district.
And there's, bless you, there's this reference that Mr. Niles was mentioning to the.
Which section is that in?
4-6 that dictates that the meetings shall happen in the city. of Boca Raton, and we kind of left it blank on of operating on, or left it the same operating under sort of the premise that if there's no need to change, why highlight it? But Mr. Now pointed out that might be something we want to explore. And we did have an actual situation with COVID when the governor's order was lifted, allowing for virtual meetings. The city did not allow external organizations to meet in city facilities. And so we said, Christine was desperately looking for an alternate venue. We said, let's try the county, or let's try Boynton Beach or another city. And that limited us. We had to meet in the city, which is why we then were meeting in a hotel. So it may make sense that since we lived that, to just stay in Palm Beach County or something like that. So we thought we would bring that forward to you as additional discussion.
Yeah, the county would include the city. I'd be in favor of county.
That covers everything.
I don't see any reason to go outside.
You're right, an emergency situation. Gives us flexibility.
Okay, so change that to county instead of city. Got that?
And the change to the fiscal year as determined by the board.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Keep going.
So the only other change is to section 8, referring to the executive director, here referred to as airport manager. And this is just an articulation of your existing bylaw requirement of non-interference. So it's elevating the non-interference clause to the enabling act, which was a staff suggestion at the last session. And with that, those were the changes that I made since the workshop. And I'm open to any additional comments, questions that you may have.
Those are changes you made as a result of the workshop.
Yeah.
That's right.
Doesn't change the very important. Well, yeah.
Yeah, two quick things. The last change,
Yes.
with this board, we don't need it, but the past history of the airport, I think that's good. We don't get involved. We don't interfere. We let the staff run the airport. The second thing, I think I mentioned previously, when we have work copies, can we have the pages numbered?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Makes life a lot simpler. Thank
we'll
you.
make a note of that. And remove the comments as well.
Anything that we can understand. Yeah, Phoenician,
Okay, any other questions?
it's good.
Staff or attorneys? Yeah, on those changes. Again, a lot of the work was done at the workshop.
Very nice.
And the staff.
She listened.
So
Sure.
So now we have a document that we are all people with, and if it were passed and presented, we would say fine. At the last workshop, though, we also identified some areas that might cause some additional ops as we pass them through. And I just want to ask and to clarify how you intend doing that, and to confirm that you will pass on those areas, that information to our outside counsel, who will be lobbying the legislature on our behalf, that, okay, here it is, here are the changes, here's the clean, here's the highlighted, but those that we have marked, and I think there were at least 2, if there is any pushback whatsoever, we authorize them to cut them free so that we may go forward with this process.
I think we addressed a few of them at the workshop. There were 2 that come to mind. One was the eminent domain question.
Right.
We removed that. And then there was the telephonic participation as well as the quorum issue. So per the guidance that was offered by Chris and Amy last week, we removed that. And throughout, we sprinkled reference to as provided under general law, to specify that we're not asking for a change to general law.
Just to be clear, Chris will not have to waste any time and come back to us on these 3 or 4 areas that we have identified, say, hey, now we need to wait for the board to confirm that we want to, no, we're telling them he can do it. If he's sitting there and he has a conference with Speaker of the House, where he's having his conference with, to go through this, and they go, yeah, I don't know about that. You know what?
If I
move forward, 'cause it's always
Consultation.
Well, Chris is on the line and Chris, I hope that you don't answer. My recommendation would be, because to your point, Ms. Budd, this is a pretty accelerated process, that you maybe delegate some of that to the that my recommendation would be that perhaps you delegate the shepherding of that process and the coordination with the lobbyists and staff to the chair, who understands the wishes of the board and can sort of,
With a phone
help.
call or
Is that
whatever.
okay?
Yeah, I think so. And
So-
as you said, Chris is on the line, but I would anticipate that you would be getting regular updates as to how your process is working. And so if ever there was a suggestion to change the bill in a way that for y'all was a deal breaker, I think you would have chances to say, okay, well, if that's the case, then we're not interested in pursuing.
So do we need to take action on that? I think that's a great idea.
Let's see. We have a resolution from us, 11/28/2 is.
No, I meant to get it on the delegation of authority.
I guess we could add it there. I think the resolution.
I think so, Amy, that'd be appropriate to for the board to vote on the resolution to file the bill as drafted, but to delegate authority to the chair to work with the lobbyists to address real-time issues that may impact the language of the bill as presented.
Board chair and item number 4 after legal counsel.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, this is Chris
Executive
Lyon.
secretary are hereby authorized to do all things necessary to effectuate the intent. Just so you have a board rep kind of input.
And Chris has some thoughts.
Chris, yeah, I'll introduce Chris Lyon. Chris, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I was just going to echo Clara's thoughts. The legislative process moves quickly. It is the rare bill that passes in the exact same form that it was filed. It's a give and take process. Sometimes it's technical issues, sometimes it's substantive. So rather than having to wait for your next regular board meeting to consider changes, or rather than having to hold emergency board meetings to consider changes, I wholeheartedly support Clara's suggestion that we delegate to you and, in consultation with Clara and Amy, any changes to the language going forward. But I am hearing you all. I know these points that you all are concerned about. I've got that, but I just wanted to make sure that you all understood. I completely support that idea.
Thanks, Chris.
So
Talking about amended resolution now, go ahead.
So my suggestion would be in the draft resolution that's before you to add a section that specifically delegates authority to the chair to work with the lobbyists to amend the draft enabling act as may be necessary for its implementation. That would be a separate line item, and then 5 would stay the same. And if you agree with that change, then you can vote on it with direction for that change. I can make that change and then it can be executed based on tonight's vote.
Well, I think we can vote on it now based on. your-
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Everybody understands. Okay, amendment. Genius. So, okay, any other conversation or questions? We all understand this resolution. Okay.
Just a question
Yep.
before we have to approve the engagement letter as a separate conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're talking about resolution 11/28/22. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. There's gonna be a lot of work related to that. All right, next item is review of the engagement.
Sure.
Yes.
The subject, I have a question. At our last workshop, I think we were all reflecting on the fact that we had relationships with two of our favorite politicians who are no longer going to be our favorite politicians. I'd like to know if we have, when should we be reaching out to these new politicians, and does anybody have a relationship with them?
I do not, unfortunately. We were, I think, all of us a little bit startled last Wednesday when we read the headlines. But Mr. Now and I have had conversations about now that once this process is complete, that you've approved it and have empowered us to go forward, that we would begin that process right away, because it's going to be.
I believe the county commission changes like immediately. I think I
Yeah.
saw something that changed.
So would that
Yeah.
include like,
I don't know about the state legislature.
yeah, so you're thinking like the basics, like touring the facility,
Yeah.
going, I mean, from the ground up, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Did ask the city, there's an event here at Tech Runway, under Dr. Kelly last night, and it was one of the assistant city managers was there. I asked her what the process is going to be. There is a city council member who ran unopposed on Andy Thompson's seat. So the question is, are they going to be appointed like had been done in the past because their term begins in March, or the city council is expected to take some action on that at their next meeting. So we'll know whether that's going to, I would assume it's happening, that they will appoint, but if they don't, we'll still be working with Andy until that happens. And similarly with the Mayor Weinroth. Yes,
Said.
true, I'm sorry, yeah, there will be no working with that, working with Bob until he gets whatever the transition is in the county. I'm afraid I'm not that familiar.
To answer Gene's question, I mean, I've met both Marcy and Peggy. We interviewed them through the chamber pack. I've met Peggy a couple of times, and I know a little better Fran Knockles, who's taking over. So anything, have to try to facilitate anything
Would be helpful.
based on that. So we could talk offline, Claire, too.
We'll have to move quickly to.
Yeah. Yes, very.
I really call the deadline for filing is December 20th.
Number 10. Yes.
I think all those people will be great to work with. I mean, I think, both the person that beat Andy and the person that beat Bob are both, very business minded people, and I think we'll be.
And maybe they're looking for like a win quick out of the gate.
Yeah.
And this could be, something that could help them, get
Yeah.
that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. So that motion passed as amended. So next item is the engagement letter. That also we received via email a couple days ago outside of the board packet, and you have it in front of you in hard copy. So we're looking at the engagement letter, and who's going to present that? Claire?
Certainly I can introduce it. The board will recall that the way we structured this process was that once you give us the green light to go ahead and move forward with the filing of the bill, we would engage with Chris, who's obviously with Lewis Longman and Walker with the firm. So he's not external counsel, he's with the firm, but his specialty is the legislative process of the Tallahassee to assist us in kind of shepherding this process along. So Chris has prepared this engagement letter that addresses this specific engagement, this process that will, and articulates everything that he will be doing on behalf of the airport authority. And we recommend authorizing the engagement letter to get this project going. He structured it in a way that, there are some stopgaps, and he has a firm that he would work with us throughout the process, kind of keeping us up to date and understanding if at some point the board decides not to go, we have that line of communication with him. But as you know, he's on the line. If you have any specific questions about the way the agreement is structured, I understand this is sort of a hybrid of a typical lobbying contract or engagement that was specifically tailored to what our needs are. But Chris can speak more directly to the thought process behind the way it was structured.
And the total amount is $60,000 with several payments due over a time period that gets us through this legislative session.
Correct, based on the sort of the intervals of the effort and work that he foresees.
Mitch, I saw you first.
Yeah. So this is specific just to the bill.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's outside of our contract with Lewis and Walker.
So
Yes.
I'll ask the question. The first question I have is, have we done this recently with anybody else? Do we have something to compare it to? Not judging one way or another whether $60,000 is a fair amount or not, but it's an important question to ask, you know, for what we're expected to be getting. I don't see a list of the duties. It does make reference in here to section 2 of the engagement agreement, but maybe I missed that somewhere, but there is a section. That's in here. I don't have my glasses today, so I'll have a little bit of this there.
To speak to the question regarding if we have any other experience, no, this is the first time that we've actually engaged a lobbyist to do any lobbying for us, and certainly, you know, to do anything related to the legislative process. However, I have Mr. Now and I talked, and based on your experience, Jim, right, this seems very, you know, sort of typical. It's not something that you see as an outlier. In talking with Chris as well, you made reference to this is sort of their standard, you know, process that they undergo, and sort of the standard billing methodology that they employ for this type of process. As you know, he's got a lot of experience doing this same process of local bills on behalf of numerous other clients.
Chris, okay.
Indeed, we do, yes. And he can speak more to that, but he will be in Tallahassee, literally walking the halls with both the staff, the legislative staff, DEP, TIF, which owns the land, and with the legislators as well.
Randy, and then I'll give it to Chris.
It says $60,000 flat fee to the extent that Amy's working on this. Will she not be billing us separately for her time if she's working on this matter?
You know, I'm not a partner, but I can tell you that my intended practice would be that if I'm working with Chris under this matter number, then you may see my effort listed because I just keep time. That's how I practice, but you won't be billed separately under the general representation. This is a flat fee, and so the effort will be reflected, and there won't be any payment that's required in addition to these flat fee payments.
And then,
Chris, is that right? I don't want to talk out of turn, but that's how I would have expected it to be handled. Me too.
That's correct, Amy.
Okay.
and then I assume there would be some expenses that would be associated with this, with the 60 as well, just so we have a number in mind with like travel.
Yes, there is a, I think it's section 5. Any direct costs that we incur in the representation are billed on top of that. I don't expect a whole bunch. You know, the ones right offhand that I can think would be just like you all were discussing earlier. You all have a lobbyist registration process. There is a lobbyist registration process at the state level. And so there is a direct cost there. You know, outside of that, if I needed to travel down to Boca to do some meetings with folks, to, you know, go with Clara or whomever to do some meetings, I would charge for my travel, but that would be what I expect.
But not your time.
Correct. My time, all of my time is encompassed in the flat fee.
And then one more question directly for Chris. You know, obviously this is a lot of money, you know, from our perspective. What's your batting average? I would say on local bills, trying to pass local bills, I'm probably in the 90s. Okay.
I mean, I not to brag on myself, but I don't think there is another lobbying firm in this state that does as many local bills that we do and have done over the last 20 years. We do more than anybody else. And so you'll get the full benefit of that experience and knowledge and the relationships that all these years working with these same folks bring.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, just going back to the budgeting, you'll recall that when the budget was adopted for fiscal year 2023, there was a set aside that you allocated at Mr. Noble's suggestion and in his oversight of the budget process, specifically for the lobbying efforts that is separate from the sort of the general operating file. And so I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. So the work that Ms. Petrick has done related to the drafting of the bill and the research has come out of the operating budget, so to speak. But because that's not the lobbying effort yet, so the lobbying effort will be covered under that set aside funding that you appropriated.
Very good. Okay, so I guess I'm looking for a motion to accept this engagement agreement with Sloan Cooperative. So I got a motion. Second, Carol. Any other discussion, questions? We have Chris on the line. We know what needs to be done by December 20th.
Get her done.
Yeah. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Chris, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board.
Yep. All right, next item B, 10B, Executive Director Contract Amendment. And we have that also, came to us an email earlier today outside of the board packet. You have a hard copy in front of me. So I'm going to turn over to Randy.
Yeah, I'm gonna give a little bit of background just to refresh everybody's memory. If you recall last fall, we did commission a compensation study to look at the employee salary ranges, including Clara's compensation. The results were reviewed at the January meeting, which is approaching a year now. At that meeting, we discussed the age of Clara's existing contract, which was drafted in 2013. So it's approaching 10 years, and it has not been amended since. At that time, the board agreed that we wanted to do a new contract with Clara that did three things. A, incorporate the results of the compensation study. B, would make sure that our compensation practices for this position, given Clara's tenure of almost 9 years here and her performance are in keeping with the market. And finally, C, would provide incentives that can help retain Clara into the future. The board then tasked me to work with Amy and Clara to develop a new contract. Subsequently, Amy and I have met, I believe 3 times to review the existing contract or agreement and work with Clara on the terms that you will see in the final product. And Clara is in agreement with the document that you are seeing today. A couple of other things just to add, just in line with some of the preamble, we put a structure in place that would incent, that we would hope would incent Clara to remain the ED until she no longer wants to be an airport ED. We, used and looked at a lot of best practices and what's happening in other airports. Naples in particular was a great reference point, for us. And I think the contract also, we talk about best in class a lot. It keeps us, kind of focused on that. And, finally, I'd say, and then I'll turn it over to Amy to go through the highlights. There's nothing really here that's out of the box. The most significant thing that we're updating, some of the car allowance has been the same, for 10 years. So, we're updating that, and the increase looks good, but it looks big, but it's consistent with what the market is telling us. Probably the most significant thing that we'll see that will have a financial impact is we're adding a retention bonus that does escalate over time as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy.
Thank you. The memo that I wrote for you, where I summarized the key changes, was organized between things that affected compensation and things that did not. However, for the purpose of today's conversation, what I'd like to do is go through the draft employment agreement, and we can talk about those things. Now, my suggestion is that we talk about the things that are in red, because those are the things where I made significant wording changes. Now, throughout the document, I will tell you, this employment agreement was built off of the old one. I didn't write it from scratch. But there were places where I fixed typos or I made small wording changes that did not affect the substance. So places where it's red, I think there's one place where for some reason the track changes reflected in green, but where you see colored language, that is new or substantially amended. So if we can walk through that, I can kind of tell you what the thinking is. And at any point where you want to engage in discussion, I think that is probably a good way to proceed, since there are a lot of different topics that are covered by these changes. The first page, the recitals, the changes are simply intended to reflect what your Enabling Act provides with respect to the hiring of an airport manager, and then also the fact that this is not a new contract, this is an existing employment relationship. So those are not changes that were intended to be particularly substantive, other than to correctly reflect the status of the relationship as it is now. On the back of the first page, there is an initial provision that is intended to explain to the reader how this contract works in concert with your more generalized employee handbook. And so throughout the 6 years that I've been your counsel, from time to time, there have been issues where the question has come up, how do we handle this issue with respect to the executive director? And so this is intended to answer that question. The original term was a 3-year anniversary date. The reason why it's in red is because at one point we were thinking of changing that, but it is the same as what it was. This doesn't have an indefinite period of automatic renewal. If you look, it is each renewal term is a 3-year renewal. So it resets every 3 years. So that's the only change that we made to the term section. The first change really substantively has to do with the devotion of effort section. This was a change that was asked for by the executive director because opportunities within the industry come up from time to time, whether it's an educational opportunity of teaching within the industry, whether it's a board appointment related to something either in the region or in the industry. And so we wanted to update this language in order to allow the executive director to take advantage of those opportunities to the extent, and it's very important, the language is very clear, that it does not create a conflict of interest and does not interfere with her responsibilities. So that's what you see under 4B. Under 4C, there's a reference to the travel policy, making clear that travel will be compensated under the manual. And those were the only changes made to section 4, which related to duties and devotion of effort.
So if I'm getting the picture correct, anytime there's some kind of discrepancy, we go back to the employee and for the most part. I guess what we talked about earlier and
right.
Set.
The more specific provisions of the contract control over the manual, but where it is silent, then you follow the manual. That's how we've organized this relationship. Okay, so if there's no further conversation on duties, then we go now to the compensation section. We updated her salary to a number that is what she's actually getting. That's not a change. It's just it just needed to be updated for the
Prove that.
the document. Right, this is her current salary. Now, under the annual performance review, the first section that you see in red is just specifying that the annual performance review is intended to help in the determination of performance-related bonuses and merit raises. It does not have an impact on the retention bonus program that is new to this document. then there's an explanation of how the annual performance review is intended to work. Each board member shall complete a written annual performance review. That is current practice. And so this is just reflecting that that's supposed to be done prior to the board meeting where you consider the annual review. The written annual performance review is intended to be based on the measurable goals that is set forth within your annual budget. Each year you have strategic goals that you adopt as part of your annual budget and also your strategic business objectives. Yes.
5B. One there, Roman 1. Each board member shall complete written annual performance.
Yes.
Is that what we had before? There were years where
People did not do it.
they did not do it.
Right.
They were asked to, and they didn't.
I can tell.
Well,
If you give me 1 second, I can pull up the language. Because I do have her old contract here. So 1 second. All right. So the bonus program, as it was explained in her original, did not specify very much at all about how it was going to work. And so it was intended to be the practice of having performance reviews, but it says executive director's performance shall be evaluated annually by the authority. So it's not that explicit.
This is explicit.
It's
So
intended to be.
my
Yes.
question is, what if that scenario were to present itself? Rear its ugly head again. What would it be the responsibility of the chair then to look to his board or her board and say, you need to fulfill your responsibilities and you shall do this?
it's chair, but it'll say shall, they're gonna have. For councils,
Yeah, I mean, the consequence is that you would potentially be in breach as a board. And
That's what I'm
so,
asking.
and that was
The contract on that
so I can see what I'm saying. That.
clearly implied. It just wasn't.
I-
No, I'm all for this. I
Yes.
guess. I thought it was for the.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, point. Okay.
okay, so looking at the performance reviews, the idea is that you look at the goals set forth in your budget, you look at your strategic business objectives, and then you have the ability to factor in unanticipated achievements of the executive director. For example, COVID happens and she has to mount a response for you in regard to something that you certainly wouldn't have anticipated. For each of the categories, the idea is that instead of having things that feel super subjective, it's either she fully implemented, she did not fully implement, but she made progress, or she did not address. And the intention with this is to make it a little bit more objective and a little bit easier for y'all to implement in a way that feels consistent for you. And that is based on just quite frankly, my observations as sometimes from year to year, you struggle in maintaining consistency in your implementation of the performance review process. So that's the intention. Now, moving to the next section under the performance bonus, the range is 0 to 20%, which is, I think, what it was originally. We put some bumpers on either end. So in order to get the full 20%, the executive director will have had to have fully implemented at least half of the measurable goals and strategic objectives within the given year. If she has not fully implemented at least half, she may not receive the full 20%. Conversely, if she fails to address at all at least half, then
You say she may not, you mean she can.
that's right. If she fails to address at all at least half, then you have the ability, the board may determine that she is entirely ineligible for a bonus. And so the intention was to further give you some measurable objectives to help you understand when a full bonus is received or the bonus is not given at all. For merit raises, the merit raise is not subject to a range. And it simply is, you may consider the performance review in setting the raise. And so This one does not have that same set of bumpers that the performance bonus has within it.
If I may interject, this is the one where you go out and do an environmental scan and say, well, what's happening in the economy? And so here's the average, here's the median in times of,
Yeah.
downturn in the economy, it might be a 2%.
Yeah.
So in other times, it might be a 10. So just to clarify.
Yeah.
And just, so that's performance bonus, that's merit. Now, the next one is the retention bonus, which is the new program. The intention here, because other individuals in a similar situation do have retention bonuses that have been, for example, in Naples, they have a retention bonus program. The executive director has worked for 9 years without a bonus. And so the idea
That retention bonus.
that's right. I'm sorry. Specifically, retention bonus. That's absolutely right. So the idea is that if this agreement is executed, then within 30 days, she would receive an upfront retention bonus, which would be a lump sum payment equal to 15% of her salary. Thereafter,
Sorry, you just need to understand that. So
yes,
this is simply a recognition. It's kind of in hindsight that you have been with us for nearly 10 years. Because typically a retention bonus is tied to you, the future, you will be with us for X number of years. So talk to us a little bit about the regularity of that, because that's a little bit, I have not seen that too much. But normally the reason I guess you have it is because we didn't have it in the beginning.
that's
So
right.
the original contract, if we were saying retaining Clara now, and Clara were to go to her attorney and we were to go to ours, she would come back likely and say, and would probably offer a retention. So this is in recognition. I'm talking the way I'm thinking, right? We have not had conversation with this, but just I understand it when you guys do as well. That it wasn't written in there in the beginning. She's coming up on 10 years. She, we were hiring her today, we put it in, so it is a bit of a recognition that this is a milestone year coming up. So basically, all that would need to happen in order for us to be responsible for paying this 15% is you sign this,
That's right.
that we agree to it. So we just need to understand
Yeah.
right off the top.
Yeah, and maybe retention, maybe it's longevity or something, this was wording used in another contract. So, I would akin it to, if you're an executive position in a publicly traded company, corporate environment, you're getting stock options and that
Yes.
vest and reward longevity with the organization.
So now the rest of it, talk about. That's
Correct.
I also took it as, I looked at it a little different way, which is the workplace environment and how hard it is, difficult it is to get talented people like employers all the time. They're trying to get people and the difficulty of that. And when you have somebody who is performing well and you want to retain them, that's a lot cheaper than trying to go out into the marketplace. And
that make sure.
yes, I make that a little different.
The retrospective piece is
Yeah.
a little bit different.
I got you. Okay.
But certainly the prospective,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
I see your way. Retention, just is a way to recognize the amount of time and the effort that players put in, but to make it go forward so that she's acknowledged and compensated and she's incentivized to stay with us. But it's really pay forward. To me, that's what we're thinking. Not retroactive.
But it's a little bit of a misnomer, to be quite honest, to put the 15% here and call it retention. A little bit.
Well-
A logical misnomer, whether it is legal accuracy or not, let's set that aside. But concept is the same. It is a recognition.
Yes.
You're exactly right. Retention means we want to keep you for all the reasons that you just said. We have an investment in you. Hopefully it is mutual. We are happy with you. We want to keep you. And the cost to us of replacing Clara, aside from going to an outside agency, a headhunter, and then the time that it would take to bring that person up to speed is more than equal likely to the 30% that we're talking about.
Well, and just as you're saying, the way that this is written, while it's under the header of retention bonus, that first payment, it says is in recognition of her tenure
That's what I'm
with the
saying.
authority.
Yeah, recognition.
And
I'm just saying.
and so, and then the next,
It's just the name of the subhead.
and then the next sentence talks about the beginning of the retention bonus program, which she's now eligible for the following retention bonuses. So that first payment is not considered a retention bonus. It's the ones that happen in the future.
Correct.
Maybe you change the sub. Thank you. How many ages were okay?
And so the first retention bonus is at the end of, or is at the commencement of the first renewal term, so at the end of 3 years, and it's for 20%. Then at the end of the second renewal term, which is at the end of 6 years, it's 25%. And then every 3-year term after that, it's 30%. And so the idea is the longer you stay, the more valuable the retention bonuses become. If that's the idea of the incentive, that's how this is structured.
And that was, did you do any environmental scans? Because it seems fairly rich, but just tell me that.
So one of the touch points was for the Naples airport, and that was at 25%. When that was
Those same my points.
it was 25% across the board. And when we brought that forward, Mr. Noble's suggestion was to stagger it so that it equaled out to the 25%, but that it incentivized the longer term.
So it is payable at the end of each month.
The beginning of the new one,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
3 year in.
That's a 3 year.
Yes. And that is different. It's different from
My. He should be based upon everything that, you know, you have to take into consideration, like, you know, RFPs and everything else that we do. We just have to have support.
So the city of Naples has every 3-year term a 25% retention bonus. And that was how we initially wrote it. And then we decided to stagger it so that it equaled out to the 25% over what we think is the likely 10-year horizon, but it was staggered to encourage retention in those later terms. So yes, so the numbers got there to the same place as what our touchstone was, but the staggering was intended to provide additional incentives.
So, you know, to answer your question though, Cheryl, is it typical? I don't know. We did see it in contracts, most notably Naples. You know, if we were to start over with somebody other than Clara, would we have this and would it be that rich? Probably not. This is specifically to the employee that we have now.
And there were other examples that had different structures, but similar programs in
Exactly.
the compensation study. Some were more generous, others were less generous, others had lump sum payment.
So those of us who would be around in hopefully the very distant future, when we're at a new executive director, you would look to this and say, you know.
Similarly to when I started my contract, as you may recall, it was vastly different than my predecessors.
Yes.
Certainly. Okay, so then the next section is the benefit plan. We clarified that life means universal life, and we attempted to articulate what the long-term disability coverage means. We received input from your insurance consultant as to what long-term disability typically means, but we put in there a reference to market availability in case the specific long-term disability coverage product was unavailable. So that was the change that you see under the benefit plan. With respect to retirement payments, a question has arisen because there are federal tax rules which limit how much you can put into the specific kinds of accounts, the 401A and the 457B. And so the question under the existing contract is, what do you do with the extra percentages? These percentages exist in the current contract, but it's not explained. Okay, if you've hit your statutory maximum under the federal guidelines, what happens? Does the executive director not get that additional percentage? Does she get it in a lump sum payment? How is it handled? And
tax implication.
right.
The government does.
So the intention under G is just to explicate the process so that it is clear what happens to percentage payments that exceed the guidelines for how much you can put into those very specific investment accounts. So the vacation and the sick leave, it was 20, now it is 25, and that is consistent with, I think, what your compensation study showed. And then I think it reflects current practice, but I wanted it articulated that vacation is one thing, sick leave is another, and sick leave is handled under the employee manual, as is payment for unused time in the event of a separation. So that's what is in H. I don't know if y'all have any questions about that. Now, with respect to your auto allowance, your compensation study indicated that that was a number that was outdated and gave a range for similarly situated employees from 750 all the way to 1,450. And in Naples, that number was for their executive director, it was recently updated to 850. 800 was the number that was arrived through negotiation here. The question was, do we have to go back in and change this contract every time, you know, kind of the market moves on with respect to the auto allowance? And so the idea here was to create an interval increase for each renewal term of $100, just so that you don't have to come back in and amend the contract constantly to address what's happening in the market with auto allowance. And then the other thing for this kind of payment is the annual physical was originally $250. We made it $500 just to reflect the change in medical costs. However, keep in mind that that is actual cost expended based on the production of documentation and is not a flat fee. So those were the changes to the compensation and benefits sections. I don't know if anybody
Any other questions on?
has questions on that. With respect to the termination of employment, I simply referenced for everybody's edification that a 4/5 vote is actually required by your Enabling Act in order to hire or fire, whether it's for cause or without cause. And so that's just a reference to what your Enabling Act says. I added grounds for cause that are intended to track your current policies and what is happening in state statute with respect to obligations that routinely come before the executive director. And so there's reference to your drug-free workplace, anti-discrimination, the ethical requirements of Chapter 112, which is the public ethics law, and then your grant assurances. So that, for me, I felt like that was just kind of largely a housekeeping issue that I wanted for it to be clearly stated. I'm not suggesting that you could not have fired for cause for those reasons under the existing contract, but it's just nice to have, you know, the clarity. So under 8, the restrictive covenants, there's a non-interference with employees section. The way that it had been written in the past, it appeared to me that the intent is if you have an executive director that is going to leave, that they don't go around and talk to the employees and encourage them to come with him or her as they leave and go someplace else. However, the language that existed in that agreement was incredibly broad and suggested that the executive director could not talk to current employees who wanted to give notice about their future. And so the concept, understanding, of course, that these kind of restrictive covenants are not favored by the law, was to make it as narrowly tailored as possible and still effectuate your intent, because this way, I think it is more likely to be enforced by a court if you ever get to a place where you would have to employ this. So that's what's happening with that language. The next. I think that's it. That's it. So I don't know if there are other concepts that the board wants to address that we can talk about what was considered and not included in the document, but these were the recommendations after negotiation.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments? Yes, Gene.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of elements involved in this, and so I guess maybe as Randy, since he participated in this, the total compensation, if you add it up, is over $400,000. That what was anticipated, and it's within the budget.
I believe the retention bonus was not in the budget. That is something new, which is, gonna be 15% of.
But it's once over 3 years.
Once over 3 years too. Yeah.
It's not 15%.
It's time to sign it, $36,000 if we sign it now.
Right, but that's.
But then she doesn't get that again.
Just asking, in this year's, is this amount,
Question when we were negotiating, and my understanding is that it did not require a budget amendment to effectuate this agreement.
So, we would have built in, the normal, merit increase that we would, typically give Clara along with her normal performance bonus. So, the new element is that 15%. So it's a $36,000 budget variance.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a resolution before us, number 112922 on the executive director's employment contract. So motion. Second by Bob. Any other questions or comments? Amy represented us as a board, so we appreciate your help, Amy, and Randy certainly.
Yeah, it sounded like the Naples example was right on
Yeah.
right on the money, so to speak.
No pun intended.
Yeah. Okay. Hearing none other, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Congratulations on the contract.
Yes,
That's
Really-
here.
Thank you.
This got me just while we're on this subject, about our employees. We talked about our executive director, and we did do our compensation study, so I feel comfortable with all our employees. We're in a reasonable salary range for them. But I wondered, did we look at benefits when we did the employee compensation? I wonder if we should, what the consensus the board might be able to do one more study. Now we've done salaries, now we've done contract. If we look at our benefits, again, thinking about retention of employees, those issues, should we authorize staff and council? Well, I guess we have an outside group that does benefits and salaries, right?
Right.
So, Mel, what do you think?
Well, my conversations with Clara through the years, I think Clara is in favor of a retention program for the employees. Am I correct?
Yes, and I've spoken with each of you about that, and I think it's the same concept of wishing to retain me at my level, and I sincerely am grateful for that. I'm very honored. It applies to the entire team. Everyone knows the difficulties in retaining and attracting and retaining top talent. We spend a lot of time and effort with each of the employees, making sure that they are adequately trained and achieve industry certifications. And we invest a lot in them as individuals. And we are reaping those benefits because you see the level of activity that each one.
I guess I was thinking
So,
broader
yeah.
day, vacation days, I don't know.
change, employment, insurance, health insurance, all those things that are going on
In today's tight job market, we need to be doing everything.
We're running a very dynamic organization here.
Right, and a slim one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And a slim one.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Okay, so I think where you're going with this would be that we could consider authorizing staff to look into such thing and including benefits. But I would just caution on the retention on the staff level that it needs to be tied to performance and tenure. So in other words, if I hire you, it is not automatic that you get a retention at year 5, year 4, year 10.
You earn a retention bonus, that's right.
You have, it is a combination of tenure and performance.
Yes.
Otherwise it's a throwaway. So I
Of course.
absolutely agree that it's important to have the staff engaged and loyal. I think they are those things. And as you mentioned, in the job market, we need to do this. So it's a self-preservation. It engenders loyalty. It's probably the right thing to do. But again, you don't just sort of like that.
Okay, so the base salary.
That's
Right.
that's not necessary.
Correct.
So.
And that is,
And the one thing I think us and Claire, Scott, is that the years I've been hanging around here, off the board and on the board, under Claire, there's been a great cross training going on. I mean, look at him.
Exhibit 1.
Number one. No, I mean, that goes back to what you were talking about earlier. We never get left hanging.
I would just say in a corporate environment right now in South Florida, it's so. We never, I mean, you just don't want to be in that position. It's just extraordinary.
I think we're setting a pathway forward to avoid that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amy, do we need a vote or a consensus is good enough to authorize a look into a review, I should say, of employee benefits package, including possibly a retention program?
If you're asking the staff to do something on kind of an informal basis, then I think the conversation with board direction is enough. If you're asking them to engage somebody, then you would need an official board vote.
So anybody want to make a motion? I guess we are at.
Have to engage them.
Yeah,
We with internet's virtually. It would be.
actually,
So.
that was the intent.
Well,
And work with Randy. Oh, excuse me.
The timing. I don't know, and I just literally don't know when's the appropriate. Is it appropriate time to do it now, or is it appropriate time to do it later on this year? And the reason I bring that up is what we see today may not be accurate when we go really to consider this down the road, unless we're going to be making adjustments on the fly.
Yeah, I was thinking next year, but yeah, it's good to set a deadline back in July or something. I don't know how long it takes to do something.
Odds are it takes a few months, especially if we're going to look to hire consulting firm, which is would be my recommendation. That's worked out well for us and historically to work with experts. And so it would take a few months. And so, we can see what they recommend once they engage in that process, and then we can decide whether that's something that we want to adopt in midstream of the fiscal year, or the board would prefer to, wait until the next fiscal year. So once we see what the proposals are, that the board can make that decision.
Well, if
Had to have work now, make adjustments, but sooner or later, whatever we need. And by that time, when it takes a few months, we'll get a feel for the lay of the land, as they say.
Is part of what you're saying, Mitch, is we may get data that just happens to go aside with the peak of the labor market and that could change.
Yeah, so I think we have, I don't know. I don't think everybody's contract was, they start. Okay, so people here have different contracts started at different times. So depending on when you do this, it will have a different effect. You have to take bear all that into consideration as to where that goes. So just, all the ingredients to go into what we're doing here to get that done right. But yes, that is my concern. So what we see today may not be what we see in 4 months or 8 months. So I just want to make sure that we take all that into consideration. And we did a budget for this year based upon certain data and information that may or may not fit.
Well, and if, again, to Ms. Budd's point from earlier, a retention bonus is future looking. So it wouldn't necessarily have an impact on this year's budget or maybe even next year's budget, depending on how it's presented. Because the idea is there would be intervals in the future.
Yes. Get away with it.
I'm second.
Yes, I agree. If the retention isn't going to be for something down. If the retention is for some employees that have a longevity that you're trying to replicate a little bit of what Clara, then that doesn't. apply.
Yeah, and
I think it's a combination.
just one quick observation, back to HR 101. When you do salary studies, the reason you do them on a periodic level, a periodic timeframe is exactly your point. So that you take a snapshot in time, but you commit that you will take that snapshot in time every couple of years, every 2 years, 3 years, to capture your point. And the retention is a percentage of salary, and that salary is offered and accepted at that point in time. You see what I'm saying?
Oh,
So I think with that as backdrop, that will address a lot of what you're saying. So you're saying now, oh, we need employees. It's like the state market. Oh my gosh, did I buy high or did I buy low? Really, you're saying the same thing. But that's why you do your best practice is you do these things every few years so that you capture the cycle periodic way and a consistent way.
Keep it dynamic.
And you keep it dynamic. And if it is a percentage of salary, then you fit yourself.
But to get to Mitch's point, what if we put a thing of to report back like the end of the first quarter of next year? We don't have to make it effective any given date. We
Right.
have to look at it, maybe we might analyze, study, adjust.
But at least we time by
March 30th.
At least we have the information. At least we have the information.
And we still have until next year before there would be a budget impact.
Yeah.
We'd be
Right.
presenting a budget with any recommendations in August to be
Correct.
effective in October.
So lost track. Motion for that?
Just give direction.
But we're gonna be engaging inside.
We do need.
If your intention is to engage a vendor to assist you in this process, I would recommend that you vote to direct staff to develop that agreement for your approval
So I'll look for a motion.
So
Second, Sheriff.
within our.
Okay, I think we're getting near the end. Is there any comments from any board member, any items that we haven't covered?
We didn't vote. We didn't vote on this.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion passed. Something on, any comments?
Nope, no. Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay. Okay, and before we run off, I do that was one of the board meeting at 5. We talked about it. We never had a whole. And Mitch.
sorry.
Order, one more extra sheet. We talked about it several months ago. We never had the whole.
Yes, and
We're currently at 5 p.m. The year is coming up. Does anybody want to do it now or be comfortable? Gina, do you have a comment?
Well, before we adjourn, I think we needed to ask if there's any more public comments.
yeah, we're still in the board.
Still in the board mode.
I do have that on this after this issue. Yes, but I'm.
The board.
Anybody in favor of moving it or keep it at 5?
We talked about lunchtime, the challenge with lunchtime.
Tim.
For, well, just in respect to everybody's schedule, if you plan something like, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and it's a lunchtime meeting and the meeting goes 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's can be problematic, at the end of the day, it's, kind of everybody's open.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, at the end of the day,
Yeah, for me, it really has to be, I mean.
I think.
I mean, I have a day job, so like.
We can always adjust it in the future.
Yeah. Work now.
Yeah.
Like if I'm doing it at noon.
It is 7 o'clock.
We usually don't go this long.
So I'm all in favor.
One last thing, I'm gonna ask one other question. Status report on the Premier's 11th Amendment, can we do that real short?
Very quickly,
Good news.
as you'll recall, there was some communication that occurred between us and FAA at the last meeting. There was conversation with Premier about them sort of providing additional information to the FAA regarding what their posture is and their request. They did that. I think they had at least 3 interactions with FAA via email and conversation. FAA responded last week, late in the week, that they are not inclined to approve. They will not approve the 11th Amendment. Their position is similar to what we had articulated, that the ground rent for any new amendment would need to be based on fair market value because it is a non-aeronautical use of aeronautical property. So that information was received by us as well as by Premier. Following that, Premier reached out to us and told us that they intend to bring something forward for the board to review at an upcoming meeting. We've asked them to present that for our review so we can put it on an agenda for an upcoming meeting for you to review.
To your point on that, so that's subsequent. Attorney Dubrasar's email or letter to you
About the loss.
about a potential lawsuit.
Correct.
Okay, and what I want to also ask about that, and I'd like your opinion on this, would be, in the event we were to be contacted individually by Mr. Dubrasar or Mr. Hashemi, I'd like to get your opinion on how we should respond to all.
Sherry,
I mean,
I think you got.
So earlier in the meeting, I think your executive director indicated that Mr. Dubrasar has listed himself as a lobbyist. And so, there's nothing that would necessarily preclude him from engaging in lobbying behaviors with you. However, when someone has indicated to you that they intend to file suit, my suggestion would be that you not engage in conversations that are not absolutely required.
Right.
Because you can and will potentially be on the receiving end of a subpoena or other discovery request. And it can be uncomfortable to be in that position if you've had private personal conversations. So
Yep, so would it be appropriate that they have sent a short email to Mr. Dubrasar advising him that they, and something to that effect, people should not be contacted and not be talking to them?
well, so obviously as a lawyer, that there are rules about having unrepresented contact. The Florida bar has relatively recently indicated that engaging in something like lobbying is not governed by the obligations that relate to unrepresented contact. So as a lawyer, I can't tell him, don't talk to my client because you serve in a public capacity. However, it is your choice not to speak to somebody. And so you have the ability
Our
to.
legal advice would be.
I have a question. The fact that subsequent to their indication of a lawsuit, the FAA said you must pay fair market value. Well, we've been saying for 20 some odd years. Does that make the lawsuit moot?
Oh, there's
We-
a lawsuit.
Yeah, we've
We don't know what he can do anything he wants to do.
never been served. We don't know what the basis was. There was no explanation. It was simply a request to me as to whether or not I was allowed to accept service for you of a lawsuit that he said his client had authorized him to file. And
The
so I
FAA
don't have any-
takes a lot of pressure off.
It depends on the nature of the claim.
I agree.
Thank you. Yeah. Speak. All right, we're at the end. The next meeting is December 14th. We have a motion to adjourn.
Yep.
Motion, public comment.
You didn't know. No, I said, yes, no public. Yes.
Anybody,
Good.
anybody want to move the December meeting a little bit earlier in the day? So it's scheduled, currently scheduled for 5.
December 14th.
You want to get a little earlier?
It's your meeting.
Like, we're gonna work.
Anybody got their calendars on?
Yeah.
Look real quick.
So what are you thinking, like 3?
Yeah, I think it's 3. I know it's a
Okay,
little tougher.
yeah, 3 would be okay. I can do 3.
Does that work?
Here.
That's
Okay.
Larry, you gonna be here?
This is an emerging technologies committee workshop, but that's recorded.
3 o'clock, we have one more question. Good. All in favor of the hearing?
December 14th, not the 20th.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll move to the 14th. See you, buddy.
Yeah.